The quantum computer's display pulsed with an otherworldly blue glow, casting shadows across Nolan Hayes's tired face. He'd spent the last 18 hours debugging an anomaly in the quantum coherence patterns, something that shouldn't exist according to every textbook he'd ever read. The numbers danced across his screen, forming impossible sequences that defied the laws of physics. His phone buzzed for the 5th time that evening. Nolan ignored it, knowing it would be his Aunt Patricia again, insisting he return home to check on his father. But the patterns before him were too compelling, too impossible to ignore. Until the phone buzzed a 6th time, and this time the quantum computer's display flickered in perfect synchronization with the vibration. Nolan blinked, wondering if his exhaustion was finally catching up with him. He reached for his phone, and as his fingers touched the screen, a surge of static electricity crackled through his hand. The message preview made his heart skip. "Dad in hospital. Come home now." The drive from Boston to the quiet suburbs of Newport took 3 hours, but Nolan's mind raced faster than his car could carry him. His father, Dr. James Hayes, had always been the picture of health, a theoretical physicist whose morning jogs and meditation routines were as reliable as the atomic clock he used in his experiments. The idea of him in a hospital seemed as impossible as the quantum anomalies Nolan had been studying. When Nolan finally pulled into the familiar driveway of his childhood home, something felt different. The air seemed to shimmer with an invisible energy, and the streetlights flickered as he passed beneath them. The front door opened before he could reach for his keys, and there she stood, a woman he'd never seen before, yet somehow seemed to bend the light around her like a prism. "You must be Nolan," she said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't quite place. "I'm Solaris. I've been taking care of your father." Nolan studied her carefully. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with silvery white hair that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. Her eyes were an unusual shade of violet that shifted like the aurora borealis, and her movements had an almost liquid grace to them. "Where's Aunt Patricia?" he asked, stepping inside. "She's at the hospital with your father. I stayed to ensure someone would be here when you arrived." Solaris moved through the living room, and Nolan couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow avoiding the shadows, always positioning herself in direct light. "What exactly happened to my father?" Solaris paused, her expression unreadable. Dr. Hayes experienced what the doctors are calling an unexplained neurological event, but his vital signs are stable now. Nolan's researcher instincts tingled. Something about the way she said doctors and neurological event felt clinical, detached, as if she were translating concepts into terms she thought he'd understand. "How do you know my father?" he asked, following her into the kitchen. "I've been assisting with his research," she replied, and for a moment Nolan swore he saw patterns of light dance across her skin, like circuits made of starlight. "His research? Dad retired from teaching 3 years ago." Solaris smiled and the room seemed to brighten. "Your father's work never truly stopped. He simply changed venues." Before Nolan could press further, his phone buzzed again. This time, the lights in the entire kitchen flickered, and Solaris's skin briefly illuminated with those strange, circuit-like patterns. She turned away quickly, but not before Nolan caught a glimpse of genuine alarm in her eyes. "You should answer that," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "It's about your father." Nolan looked at his phone. It hadn't even rung yet. As he watched, it began to vibrate in his hand, and Aunt Patricia's name appeared on the screen. That was the moment Nolan Hayes began to understand that he had stepped into something far bigger than a family emergency. The quantum anomalies in his lab, his father's mysterious condition, and this strange woman who seemed to predict phone calls and manipulate light. They were all connected by an equation he couldn't quite solve. "Your father is awake," Solaris said, just as Nolan lifted the phone to his ear to hear Aunt Patricia say those exact words. Outside, the stars seemed to pulse with an unusual intensity, and somewhere in the depths of space, an ancient signal began its journey toward Earth. A message that would soon transform everything Nolan thought he knew about reality, love, and the thin line between science and magic. He looked at Solaris again, and this time he didn't try to rationalize the way her skin shimmered with starlight. Sometimes, he realized, the most profound discoveries begin not with understanding, but with the courage to accept what seems impossible. "Tell me everything," he said, and the lights in the kitchen dimmed as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for secrets to unfold. The hospital corridor hummed with an energy that made Nolan's skin prickle. His father lay sleeping, connected to machines that beeped in patterns that seemed oddly familiar, like the quantum fluctuations he'd observed in his lab. Beside the bed, Solaris stood perfectly still, her presence causing the medical monitors to flutter ever so slightly. "The doctors can't explain it," Aunt Patricia whispered, her usually composed voice trembling. "They say his brain activity is unprecedented." She squeezed Nolan's hand before leaving to get coffee, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. Once they were alone, Nolan turned to Solaris. "Those patterns on the monitor, they match the quantum anomalies I've been studying in Boston." Solaris's violet eyes shifted like distant galaxies. "Your father's consciousness is resonating with frequencies not native to Earth." She moved closer to the bed, and the overhead lights dimmed in response to her proximity. "He's been helping us understand human neural patterns." "Us," Nolan's voice was barely a whisper. "The Australian Science Council." Solaris's skin began to emit a soft glow, her true form becoming visible as she released her hold on the human disguise. Circuits of light traced elegant patterns across her face and arms, pulsing in rhythm with the hospital equipment. "We are researchers like you, but we study consciousness itself." Nolan found himself stepping forward instead of back, fascinated rather than frightened. "The quantum patterns, their communication signals." "Yes, your father volunteered to help us understand human consciousness, but something went wrong during our last session. The resonance became too strong." Before Nolan could respond, his father stirred. Dr. James Hayes opened his eyes, which now held the same otherworldly shimmer as Solaris's. "Nolan," he said, his voice carrying an echo of frequencies beyond human hearing. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner." Over the next few hours, as night settled over the hospital, the truth emerged in waves. The Australians had been studying Earth for centuries, drawn by humanity's unique capacity for emotional resonance. Dr. Hayes had discovered their presence through his research into quantum consciousness and had become their primary human collaborator. "Your work with quantum computers," his father explained. "It's not coincidence. You inherited my sensitivity to these frequencies. The Australians recognized it in our bloodline." Nolan thought about all the times his equipment had behaved strangely in his presence, how he could sometimes sense patterns others missed. "Is that why you really retired? To work with them?" "Partially," Solaris interjected, "but he also needed to protect you, the Council. They have strict protocols about human interaction. Your father broke several rules by working with us directly." As if summoned by her words, the room's technology began to malfunction. Screens flickered, and a high-pitched frequency filled the air. Solaris's form tensed, her light patterns shifting to deep purples and blues. "They're here," she whispered. The air shimmered and two figures materialized, their forms more geometric than Solaris's, their light patterns rigid and formal. Nolan recognized authority when he saw it, regardless of the species. "Observer Solaris," the taller figure spoke in a voice that seemed to bypass air altogether, resonating directly in their minds. "You have exceeded your mandate. The human subject was to be studied, not engaged with directly." "Counselor Vertex," Solaris straightened, her own patterns brightening defensively. "Dr. Hayes's condition required intervention. His consciousness was becoming unstable due to our previous session." "And this one?" The second figure turned to Nolan, its patterns pulsing with suspicion. "Another unauthorized variable." "I'm his son." Nolan stepped forward, surprising himself with his steadiness. "And I think I understand what's happening here better than you realize." He pulled out his phone, displaying the quantum patterns he'd recorded in his lab. "These are your communication frequencies, aren't they? I've been tracking them for months." The counselor's patterns flickered with what might have been surprise. Solaris moved closer to Nalan, her light harmonizing with his natural electromagnetic field in a way that made the air between them dance. "Impossible," Counselor Vertex declared. "Human technology cannot detect our quantum signatures." "Unless," the second counselor's patterns shifted thoughtfully, "the human carries the same neural resonance as his father, a second-generation sensitivity." Dr. Hayes struggled to sit up, his hospital gown shimmering with borrowed light. "This is exactly what I've been trying to tell the Council. Humanity is ready for more than just observation. We're capable of true quantum consciousness interaction." The tension in the room built like a gathering storm, light patterns clashing and harmonizing in complex ways. Nalan found himself understanding these patterns instinctively, reading emotions and intentions in the way the frequencies shifted and flowed. Solaris's hand found his, and where their skin met, light danced between them. "The Council needs to understand," she said, both to him and to her superiors, "that some connections transcend their protocols." In that moment, as human technology struggled to cope with the presence of multiple Australians, as his father's mysterious condition suddenly made perfect sense, as Solaris's touch sent quantum frequencies singing through his nervous system, Nalan Hayes realized that he had stumbled into a revolution, not just of science, but of understanding between species. The counselor's patterns showed their growing unease, but also their fascination. They had come to enforce rules and found instead a phenomenon they couldn't ignore: the spontaneous quantum entanglement of human and Australian consciousness. Outside the hospital window, the night sky seemed to pulse with new meaning. Somewhere up there, an entire civilization was about to face a choice: adapt their understanding or lose an opportunity for connection that might never come again. And in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the symphony of light and consciousness, Nalan made his own choice. He squeezed Solaris's hand, their frequencies aligning into something entirely new, something that would either bridge two worlds or tear them both apart. Dreams had become something different for Nalan since that night in the hospital. When he closed his eyes, he saw neural pathways lit up like star maps, felt quantum frequencies pulse through his consciousness. And always, he sensed Solaris's presence, a brilliant constellation of thought and emotion that called to him across the void of sleep. 3 weeks had passed since the counselor's visit. Dr. Hayes had been released from the hospital, though his condition remained unique by human medical standards. The family home had become a curious intersection of worlds. Quantum measurement devices shared space with coffee mugs, while Solaris's ethereal light patterns cast ever-changing shadows on family photographs. "Your brain waves are synchronizing," Dr. Hayes observed one morning, studying the readouts from the modified EEG machine he'd built in his study. Nalan sat in one chair, Solaris in another, their neural patterns dancing across the screen in perfect harmony. "It's beautiful, really, like watching binary stars orbit each other." Solaris's patterns shifted to a warm, golden hue, what Nalan had come to recognize as her expression of joy. "The resonance field grows stronger each day," she said. "But the Council—" A sharp knock at the front door cut her short. Through the window, they spotted two black SUVs parked across the street. Aunt Patricia, who had appointed herself their lookout, rushed in from the kitchen. "Government plates," she whispered, her usual composure cracking slightly. Nalan felt Solaris's consciousness brush against his, a warning wrapped in concern. They'd known this was coming. Humans couldn't ignore unexplained energy signatures and hospital anomalies forever. Dr. Hayes opened the door to find 3 people in dark suits. "Dr. Hayes," the woman in front spoke, her voice clipped and professional. "I'm Agent Durham. These are Agents Foster and Rodriguez. We're with a specialized division of the Department of Energy. We need to discuss the unusual radiation readings we've detected from your home." As the agents filed into the living room, Nalan noticed how their eyes skipped right past Solaris. Her camouflage abilities had improved significantly. But their equipment hadn't been fooled. Agent Foster kept glancing at a device that looked like a more advanced version of Nalan's quantum sensors. "Your son's research facility in Boston has also registered some interesting anomalies," Agent Durham continued, fixing Nolan with a penetrating stare. Quantum patterns that defy our current understanding of physics. Nolan felt a familiar tingling sensation. Solaris was trying to dampen the energy signatures they were giving off. But something was wrong. The more she tried to suppress their resonance, the stronger it seemed to grow. "It's fascinating work," Dr. Hayes replied smoothly, years of academic deflection evident in his tone. "Quantum mechanics often produces counterintuitive results." Agent Rodriguez's device suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine. The man's eyes widened as he studied its display. "Sir, these readings, they're off the charts." Nolan felt it too, a building pressure in the quantum field around them. Solaris's attempt to hide their connection was backfiring, creating a feedback loop that amplified their resonance instead. Across the room, the television turned itself on, cycling through channels at random. The lights began to flicker. "What exactly is happening here, Dr. Hayes?" Agent Durham's hand moved toward her jacket, where Nolan suspected she carried more than just a badge. Before anyone could respond, a new frequency cut through the chaos. A signal from above that made Solaris gasp. Her camouflage flickered for just a moment, but it was enough. Agent Foster's hand went to his earpiece. "Control, we have visual confirmation of." The signal intensified, and every electronic device in the house surged with power. Through his connection with Solaris, Nolan felt the message it carried. The Australian Council had made its decision. They were coming, not just observers this time, but a full delegation. "They're going to quarantine the entire area," Solaris's voice echoed in Nolan's mind. "Your government, my people, they're both afraid of what we represent." In that moment of crisis, their resonance field peaked. Nolan felt his consciousness expand, merging with Solaris's in a way that transcended their previous connections. Through her eyes, he saw the quantum structure of reality itself, and realized they had more options than either side suspected. "Dad," Nolan spoke aloud, his voice carrying harmonic overtones that made the agent's equipment spark and smoke. "Remember your theory about consciousness-driven quantum tunneling?" Dr. Hayes's eyes lit up with understanding. "It was never just a theory, was it, Solaris?" "No," she replied, her disguise falling away completely as she stood. Light poured from her form, filling the room with impossible colors. "It's how my people travel between stars." Agent Durham was shouting into her phone. Agent Foster was reaching for his weapon, and Agent Rodriguez's devices were melting in his hands. But Nolan barely noticed them anymore. He was focused on the quantum frequencies Solaris was teaching him to manipulate, the same ones his father had theorized could fold space itself. Aunt Patricia, surprisingly calm, picked up her coffee cup and took a final sip. "Well," she said with a hint of amusement, "I suppose this family dinner is about to become rather more interesting." The air began to shimmer as multiple realities overlapped in their living room. Above them, Australian ships were breaching the atmosphere. Behind them, more government vehicles were screeching to a halt outside their home. But Nolan, Solaris, and Dr. Hayes had already begun the quantum tunneling sequence. As their consciousness synchronized, the very fabric of space-time rippled around them. They had seconds to choose their destination before both human and Australian authorities converged on their location. The last thing Aunt Patricia saw before reality shifted was her nephew and the alien he loved, their forms merging into pure light, reaching out to her and Dr. Hayes with an offer of escape. And in that moment, she finally understood why her brother had spent his life chasing impossible theories about consciousness and quantum mechanics. Sometimes, the impossible was just the truth wearing a better disguise. Quantum tunneling felt like dreaming while awake. Reality shifted around them like watercolors in rain, until they materialized in Dr. Hayes's secret laboratory, hidden deep within the Berkshire Mountains. Equipment hummed with familiar frequencies, and the walls pulsed with electromagnetic shielding that Solaris had helped design. "The quantum signature dampeners should keep us hidden for now," Dr. Hayes said, helping Aunt Patricia to a chair. She looked remarkably composed for someone who had just been transported through quantum space. "Both sides will be looking for us," Solaris's form shimmered with anxiety, her light patterns shifting between deep blues and violets. "The Council has already branded me a traitor, and your government." She glanced at the bank of monitors showing surveillance feeds of black vehicles converging on their former location. Nalan moved to the central quantum computer, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Then we need to show them something bigger than their fear." Through their resonance bond, he felt Solaris's approval of his plan taking shape. "The quantum resonance patterns," Dr. Hayes leaned forward, his eyes bright with understanding. "If we could demonstrate that human consciousness naturally produces the same frequencies as Australian neural networks." "It's more than that," Solaris interrupted, her patterns brightening. "What Nalan and I share, it's not just similar frequencies. We've created something new." She reached out, touching the quantum computer's interface. Where her energy met the system, new data structures bloomed like crystal formations. Aunt Patricia, who had been quietly observing, suddenly stood. "You need more proof than just yourselves. You need to show this isn't an isolated phenomenon." Her practical nature had always been her strength. "How many others like Nalan have you identified in your research?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The quantum computer's speakers crackled with a familiar voice. "We've found 13 others." Counselor Vertex's geometric form materialized in the center of the lab, but something was different about their patterns, less rigid, more harmonious. "Vertex," Solaris stepped forward, defensive patterns rippling across her skin. "How did you find you? I've been tracking your resonance signature since it first synchronized with the humans, but not to stop you." The counselor's patterns shifted to show sincerity. "To understand." Over the next few hours, as government forces combed the countryside above them, Vertex revealed the truth. A growing faction within the Australian Council had been watching Earth with increasing fascination. Humans' capacity for emotional resonance, combined with their quantum sensitivity, represented something their species had lost ages ago in their pursuit of pure logic. "The hardliners want to suppress this discovery," Vertex explained. "They fear it will destabilize our society, but others of us see it as evolution, a chance to reclaim something precious." Nalan, who had been quiet, suddenly straightened. The quantum computer was displaying a pattern he recognized, the same anomaly he'd observed in his lab months ago. "It's a network," he breathed. "All the sensitive humans, all the accepting Australians were already connected. We just couldn't see it." Dr. Hayes rushed to verify the data, his fingers trembling with excitement. "He's right. The quantum field itself is acting as a medium for consciousness to bridge between our species. It's been happening naturally without anyone guiding it." "Which means," Solaris's patterns brightened with joy, "we're not an anomaly to be feared. We're proof of a natural progression." But their revelation came with a price. Above ground, military satellites were triangulating their position. In orbit, hardline Australian ships were preparing to intervene, both sides racing to contain what they saw as a threat to their established order. "We need to broadcast this," Aunt Patricia said firmly. "Not just to the Council or the government, to everyone, every human with the sensitivity, every Australian with doubts." Vertex's patterns showed concern. The energy required to reach that many consciousness simultaneously, it could burn out your neural pathways. "Not if we share the load." Nalan reached for Solaris's hand, their frequencies already beginning to harmonize. "Not if we all connect." Dr. Hayes began reconfiguring the quantum computer, understanding his son's plan. They would use the lab's equipment to amplify their resonance field, creating a quantum broadcast that would reach every compatible mind on Earth and in Australian space. As they worked, Aunt Patricia kept watch on the monitors, updating them on the closing net above. Time was running out. But in the heart of that hidden laboratory, something remarkable was taking shape. A bridge between species, built not of technology or treaties, but of shared consciousness and understanding. The universal frequency was about to change its tune, and nothing in either civilization would ever be quite the same again. The broadcast began as a whisper in the quantum field. Nalan and Solaris stood at the heart of Dr. Hayes's quantum amplification array, their joined consciousness serving as the focal point. Around them, Vertex, Dr. Hayes, and even Aunt Patricia formed a supporting circle, each contributing their unique frequencies to the growing resonance. Across the globe, sensitive humans paused in their daily lives as an unfamiliar sensation tickled their minds. In Australian observation posts hidden throughout the solar system, dissenting observers felt their neural patterns shift in response. The connection that had been building naturally for years suddenly had a voice, a purpose, a direction. Through the quantum field, Nolan and Solaris shared everything. Their first meeting, their growing understanding, the discovery of their shared resonance. But more than their personal story, they broadcast the fundamental truth they'd uncovered. Consciousness itself yearned for connection across the artificial boundaries of species and space. Military helicopters circled overhead, their sensors confused by the quantum interference emanating from underground. Australian ships hung in low orbit, their weapons powered but their crews increasingly distracted by the messages flooding their neural networks. Security teams have breached the outer doors, Aunt Patricia reported calmly, watching the surveillance feeds. We have maybe 10 minutes. Dr. Hayes's hands flew over the quantum computer's controls, stabilizing the broadcast. The resonance field is spreading faster than predicted. We're reaching millions, both human and Australian. Solaris's light patterns surged with effort, her consciousness entwined with Nolan's as they pushed their message deeper into the quantum field. Through their connection, they felt the responses beginning to flow back, fear giving way to curiosity, suspicion transforming into wonder. 1,000 stories poured into their shared consciousness. A young girl in Seoul who had always known the stars were watching. A quantum physicist in Mumbai who had hidden his ability to sense patterns in space-time. An Australian observer in Jupiter's orbit who had been secretly collecting human art and music, fascinated by their emotional depth. The council chambers are in chaos, Vertex reported, their geometric patterns fluctuating with excitement. The hardliners are losing support as more of our people embrace the connection. But maintaining the broadcast was taking its toll. Nolan felt Solaris's energy flickering, her patterns starting to fade. His own consciousness burned with the effort of bridging millions of minds. Yet letting go now, when they were so close to breaking through, wasn't an option. Through their bond, Solaris shared a memory, a theorem from her advanced training about quantum resonance cascade effects. Nolan understood immediately. If they could push just a little harder, reach just a little further, the connection would become self-sustaining. Physics and consciousness would do the rest. The lab door burst open. Agent Durham led a team of armed agents inside, while simultaneously, 3 hardline Australian enforcers materialized in flashes of geometric light. But they all froze at the sight before them. The quantum amplification array had become a pillar of pure light, with Nolan and Solaris at its center, their forms barely distinguishable as separate entities. Around them, the air itself seemed to crystallize with visible thought patterns, a physical manifestation of consciousness connecting across space and species. "Stand down," a new voice commanded. Through the hole the agents had cut in the ceiling, a familiar face appeared. The director of special sciences herself had come, and beside her, projected in quantum light, stood the Australian High Commander. "We've been monitoring the broadcast," the director said, her voice carrying unexpected emotion. "What you've discovered here, it changes everything." The High Commander's patterns showed agreement. "Our attempts to remain separate have been illogical. The quantum field itself has been trying to tell us this for years." In the center of the light pillar, Nolan felt Solaris's joy merge with his own. They had done it. The resonance cascade was reaching critical mass, the connection becoming permanent. Soon, no force in either civilization could prevent what was naturally evolving between their species. As the light began to fade, allowing their forms to separate again, Nolan caught glimpses of the future through their shared consciousness. Joint research facilities where humans and Australians worked together to understand the quantum nature of reality. New forms of art created by merging emotional resonance with light patterns. Spacecraft powered by consciousness itself. exploring the galaxy through quantum tunnels. Aunt Patricia, practical as ever, was already discussing logistics with the director and the high commander. Dr. Hayes and Vertex were excitedly sharing notes about the quantum mechanics involved. And throughout the room, humans and Australians who had arrived as enemies found themselves drawn into conversations about the possibilities ahead. Solaris's patterns had settled into a calm, steady glow as she turned to Nalan. "We still have much to learn from each other," she said, both aloud and through their permanent quantum bond. Nalan smiled, feeling the truth of it in every particle of his being. "That's the beauty of it," he replied. "We have all the time in the universe." Above them, Earth's sky had taken on a subtle iridescence, a visible sign of the quantum network now connecting two civilizations. It would take time for both societies to fully adapt, for fears to fade and trust to grow. But the fundamental frequency of existence had shifted, resonating with a new harmony that encompassed both the cold logic of the cosmos and the warm complexity of human emotion. In the end, it wasn't technology or politics that bridged the gap between worlds. It was consciousness itself, reaching across the quantum void, seeking connection, understanding, and love. And in that connection, both species found something they hadn't known they were missing, a completion that made them more than they had been alone. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for them to figure this out all along.